Hello. As most of you know, if you've ever been through the sessions that John and I have done in the past, it's best if you just ask questions when they occur to you. If you save it up, I'm afraid you're going to be thinking so hard about it, you may not remember what you want, or you may be missing some other things along the way. So I just assume we won't be thrown if you interrupt us and raise your hand. We're good with that, so feel free. Despite what your agenda says, the real title for today's session is From Server to CEO, a process for bundling assessments and behavior expertise. So it's not going to be just about behaviors. The whole concept around this is to put you in a position where your first entree into an organization is at a larger dollar amount than if you tried to do everything one at a time or unbundled. So a little bit about us. We are the Metis Group, Behavior Experts at Work. I founded the business back in 1996. It's almost 22 years ago. It just seems wild to think that it's been that long when you look at the odds. And for a great deal of that time, we've been working with TTI. So we've learned some things along the way. We continue to learn. We've evolved some of our processes, and we're happy to share them with many of you because we've grown our businesses by being in this room with other wonderful people who've shared with us. We really focus our area in our expertise in three different areas. A lot in selection. How do we get the right people in the right seat of the boat? The second part is on performance acceleration. How do we make sure they have the strength, the stamina to really row that boat and get us to where we really need to go? And the third piece is on organizational health, which includes culture, it includes some strategy, but it's really about, is the organization structured to really propel the team forward? We have about, we started the business in Michigan, as I said, about 22 years ago. Maybe 11 or 12 years ago, we expanded into Charlotte, North Carolina. Jeremy was younger at the time. And, oh, good question, yeah. No, I'm not a cougar. So this is Jeremy's our son. He is my personal succession plan. Jeremy joined us in 2016 when he graduated from Michigan State. S&I, go green. Woohoo, go green. When he graduated from Michigan State, there was only one geographic area he was sending his resume, and that was Charlotte, North Carolina. He had his expertise in hospitality and in really awful hardcore sales where you're just like dialing for dollars all day long. So we poached him from that and brought him into our organization in 2016. In everything that we do, we try to help our clients have more peace of mind, knowing that they're becoming one of the best places to work, not just because they're offering the benefits or things from that, from some of those commercialized things, but they're the type of organization you really want to work with because you have the superstars that are working with you. And every superstar wants to play on a team of every other superstar, right? That's why they make the first round draft picks go to the worst teams in the league, because nobody wants to play with them. Right? That's why the superstars want to play with each other. So as we get going, one of the things I want to ask is just to get some lay of the land of the people in the room so Jeremy and I can make sure we're tailoring everything to you. How many of you have any part of your business in selection? Oh, probably about half. Good. And I'm going to ask, again, just so we can tailor this to make it most useful, whether you see, especially because I know we have a mix of very brand new people up through veterans in here, how many of you really see yourself more of selling assessments, selling solutions, or trusted advisors? So how many of you see yourself assessment selling? Okay? And how many solutions? And how many trusted advisor? Okay, great. So with any luck, this will help a lot of you who are trusted advisors add something else to your quiver in your arrows. And then the rest of you may give you an opportunity to move that forward more into that trusted advisor piece.
Thank you. So the objective of today's session is we're going to talk about a case study we did with one of my personal favorite clients. They're a microbrew in Charlotte. And they approached us. They had some issues with their current GM, and they needed to kind of relook at that position. And when we were talking about that with them, we realized that they had some pretty aggressive plans for expansion and wanted to really focus on their culture. And that kind of was driven by their staff, their servers. So we looked at the GM. Oh.
What? Oh, that's interesting.
Yep. We looked at the GM position as well as the servers. We're going to talk about the processes we put in place for each of those two very different positions. We're going to talk about what success what came out of it. They're still obviously working there, so there is some success. We're going to look at the tools and best practices that we use and highlight some of the ones we use from TTI. And we're going to talk about how we sold it in the benefits of the bundled approach. So a little bit of back history about the Olde Mecklenburg Brewery. I'm going to abbreviate it as OMB for time's sake. They're a very, very small microbrew in Charlotte. And small not because of how much beer they produce, but from their sales area. So they only sell within 50 miles of Charlotte. And they produce 20,000 barrels of beer. So to kind of put that into perspective for you, their competitors that produce 20,000 barrels of beer a year distribute in 10 states. So they hit that mark, and there's for political reasons they cannot produce more. They hit that mark in 50 miles of Charlotte. So it's pretty amazing that they're able to do that just in their own backyard. OMB, what makes them so different and so special is their kind of really unique culture. So do we have any craft beer drinkers in the room?
Oh, as
Lots.
many people as use selection.
Right. So what's your favorite craft beer brewery?
Big Rock, but that's in Canada.
Big Rock in Canada. So but what makes it so special? I mean,
Good beer.
Good beer.
All right.
Right.
And
So-
what's yours? What were you saying?
Grist, where's that?
It's in Lone Tree, Colorado.
Okay. What makes it so special?
Beer.
Beer. Yeah.
And the selection.
And the selection of beer.
Okay, great. So OMB's is unique. Their beer is very, very different. So they produce a very strict German-style beer. So their selection is not as varied as many of the other craft breweries around Charlotte. They're competing with 50 within Charlotte. So they have a very German-style beer, and I have no idea how to pronounce the brewing style, but it's a very long word. And so they drive a certain type of customer drives there and kind of drinks their beer. And so they really dove into this German culture. They don't have a restaurant. They have a beer garden. They don't have a brewery. They have a brauhaus. And you walk in there, and it's all this old wood, and you're in the middle of skyscrapers, and you walk in, and it's this old German-style pub. And it kind of really gets you into that mindset, and it's almost like a cult-like following they have, which is why they only have to sell within 50 miles of their backyard. So they're definitely a disruptor in the craft beer industry, and they approached us because they're expanding. They're putting another brewery up about 20 miles north, which doesn't sound very far, but in Charlotte is almost hours based on traffic, and to just engage more clientele. So that's why they kind of approached us and said, we need to hire a new GM, we need to hire all this new staff, help. So the approach for the general manager position was a bundled benchmark. So we kind of go through the traditional style and hire those managerial positions. And they also wanted to look at their servers. Like I said, their culture is so unique and so valuable to them that they realized that the servers are the ones that are really broadcasting that culture to their clientele, and they needed an idea of how to make sure that they continue hiring people who are going to benefit the culture and not deteriorate it.
If you notice in the middle of your tables, there are some handouts. It's one page, two-sided. It'll probably be easier for you to refer to that than squint your eyes and look at everything up here. The first approach we took with the general manager is a more lengthy approach. It's our traditional approach that we've used for years. And any of you who've sat through the sessions that John and I have done in the past on our job benchmarking approach will find that all of that's familiar. I know those of you who just went through boot camp still are very clear about what creating a job benchmark is about, the information regarding creating the job profile and things like that. What I will encourage you to do is look at the process that we put in place and things we bundled, but think about how you can modify it to be the things that you want your clients to work with. As you're looking through that, you'll also notice there are some bolded asterisked areas. Those represent the various TTI assessments that we use, and you can intersperse any of the TTI assessments that you're most passionate about along the way. When we first started working with OMB, John Marino, John is the owner, John had a manager in place at the facility on the south side of Charlotte. and realized when he was going to expand, and he says, I'm going to need a new GM on the north side of Charlotte, that he really needed two. Because the only reason that the existing GM was able to survive was because the corporate offices were located in the adjacent parking lot. And they were able to give that GM all the support he needed. But he was counter to their culture. He hid out, imagine this is in a brow house. He hid in his office. He didn't come out, and he was out of touch, and all kinds of icky things. So he realized, I need two. They had a couple of internal candidates that they said, maybe they could work. The one guy was the assistant manager. They had a shift manager who might not be bad, but they didn't want to take two really good performers there and just say, we're going to make them our general manager, especially when the only role model those two had was wrong, right? So we suggested for the general manager position using the longer approach that you see there. Any of the areas that you see as having a why are things that we included in our bundled approach. So when we presented our solution to them, we said, here's your out-the-door pricing. Any of this stuff is all included that has a why. Yes, it's included. The reason some of them don't, and I'll get to those a little bit later, is we have clients of all sizes. We have some clients where we help them hire their very first employee because they told us, this is 50% of my staff. I can't afford to screw it up. And then we've had some who have 3,000 employees. So some of them have the internal support to be able to do some of those other activities, some do not. And so we allow them to choose the other things on an a la carte basis. But you'll notice any of those things in the top part up here are all included. So we look at our definition phase. Oh, that's interesting. Let's see what happens when we go back.
Touchy.
When we go back here, you'll see this is, and those of you who've run through John's and my presentation before, you'll notice we start with our cling sheets on the board, and we do our big brain dump, and we come up with our accountability matrix. This is the scorecard. This is what success looks like in the job. This is what you have to do in order to be able to keep your job. Coming from that, we have the stakeholders in the job, everybody who's together. We facilitate debate. We don't send them away. They complete the job profile for the position. And then coming out of that, of course, they also receive behavior-based interview questions. Additionally, once that day is complete, we then follow up with some stuff that we've already included in the bundle. As an example, one of the things we do is give them the language that they're going to need for posting the position. We have found, as many of you probably know, that if you describe the type of person you're looking to put into the job, you get a much better response than if you describe the job that they're going to be doing. So we give them two documents. One's the posting that really reflects the job profile, and the other is an email they can send out to their center of influence with similar language asking for referrals. Then we do a quick salary survey. It is crowdsourced, but we're giving them an idea of what other people in the area are looking for when it comes to salary. We've been doing this about 18 months now. We've only had two different positions where our clients thought they should be paying lower than what the crowdsource came out. We thought it was going to be the reverse. We thought crowdsourcing was always going to come out higher than what our clients were wanting to pay, and that's not at all how it happened.
Explain crowdsourcing a little bit more.
Sure, crowdsourcing means there's a website where people can go out and they can just simply put in what they're telling you they're making or what they'd want to make for that position. So it's on their own honor, as opposed to asking the employers what they're paying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Glassdoor's
so we
crowdsourced.
used PayScale, which is attached to Glassdoor, for those of you who are looking. And then finally, we have a core values email exercise. Again, if you've been through our processes before, you've heard this. If not, we'll be happy to talk to you after the session about it. But the core values email exercise, we take a few of their core values, we put it into an email exercise that can be used with any candidates up front, so they're screening up front against their culture, but we'll craft that for them.
You'd be amazed at some of the horrible responses we've seen.
Oh, it's great fodder for cocktail parties.
Yeah. High-level executives,
Oh,
awful.
yeah.
So it's a great tool to implement into your selection process that's free, and it makes a huge difference.
Not only can they internalize the core values, but some people can't communicate any better than a chimp. So you might as well find that out early in the process, right?
Yeah.
Finally, next we go to the screening process. Once you have some candidates coming in, and again, these are things that we tell them that we can help with on a time and materials basis. In OMB's position, they have a very, very competent HR person. And so he was very capable of going out and doing this. He posted the job with the language that we gave him. He reviewed the resumes. When we post, it's the posting language that can be put on LinkedIn or any other websites that people like. OMB happens to have a phenomenal website of their own, and everybody wants to work at OMB. In addition to this incredible culture that Jeremy talked about, they provide benefits, healthcare benefits, 401k, et cetera, to all of their full-time employees, including full-time servers. So everybody wants to work at OMB. One of their biggest challenges is really separating the cream of the crop from the rest.
How did you approach OMB initially as a prospective client?
Great question. How do we approach OMB as a prospective client? We are strategic alliance partners, pseudonym sponsors, for Entrepreneurs Organization Charlotte, and I do presentations like this to a lot of those groups. John Marino happened to be sitting in on one of my selection presentations, then called us in to talk to his group. So great question. Whoever asked it, thank you. Once you're reviewing the resumes, again, they got some external candidates they were reviewing at the same time they were looking at some of their internal candidates. And then they were doing phone screens on some of those external candidates. Because they were handed the behavior-based interview questions that tied to the job, they actually had very few external candidates that even made it past the phone screen or the core values email exercise. In fact, there might have been one that made it to the interview, but again, being armed with the right questions, I don't think we really compared any external candidates. No. So at that point, they said, let's just see what we have with our internal candidates before we throw the net back out in the ocean and see what other critters we can catch, right? They then went through the interviews, and the internal candidates went through the exact same behavior-based interview process that the externals would have gone through. So they have to go through the same paces. They didn't have to go through the core values email exercise because their core values were quite visible in the workplace on a regular basis. They didn't have to go through review the resume because obviously that was already determined. So it was really more about are they going to be ready for the new job for which they're being considered. Once we get into the analyze phase, you can see here we have, again, a couple of other yeses. We bundle in 4 sets of assessments for candidates. If it's a one position job that's open, usually if they're doing the rest of our process, it would be rare for them to actually exhaust 4 candidates worth of assessments. So again, you can use whatever assessment you like in the selection process. We bundle up to 4. They feel really good about that. Plus, they're not, again, we're trying to avoid that nickel and dime. I don't want to have to sell them on an assessment every time they have a candidate because then they feel like, well, maybe I don't have to really assess them at this point. I've already spent all this money. No, it's already included. Please, just do the assessment. And then we can also run a comparison report as we compare the candidates against the job. And we did this for the internal candidates. They took the assessment. We took the job. We took the candidates report, and it wasn't just DISC, but that's the easiest icon without you going, what? It allowed them to realize, and OMB went in understanding nobody's going to be perfect. Whether you bring somebody in from the outside or you bring somebody in with the inside, especially when you're using multiple dimension assessments, nobody is going to fit that perfectly. But doing this gap analysis allows you to realize, is this a deal to explore in the next round of interviews? Is this going to be a deal breaker, or can we put a development report in place to make sure these people are wildly successful? If they were external candidates, we would have done performance checks, which are simply taking the behavior-based interview questions and using that as a reference check, as opposed to the old reference checks, can you fog a mirror, what was your last job type of thing. And then finally, we include our onboarding process. We used to leave this unbundled, but we found that when people tried to save that last dime at the end, it was critical to the person's success. So now we just bundle it in. You can see there are tons of assessments in here from TTI that we use. And the first thing that we do is once the candidate comes on board, or in this case, once the 2 internals were promoted, so they wound up promoting both. They took the assistant manager, Jose, made him general manager right now for the existing location. They took Gina, who was the shift manager, and they made her assistant manager, and she's being groomed. So when 15 months later, 12, 15 months later, the Brauhaus, the beer garden up at the lake comes in, she'll be positioned to take over the GM spot, and Jose can go up there. So they're really thinking through the succession. But the first, yes?
You can explain the core value process.
The core values email, I want to keep this going. I'll be very happy if we have time at the end to do that or to talk to you offline about that. That we went into a lot of depth in our other session. Good question. Don't let me forget that at the end. Okay. So in the coaching, the new hire, we convert the trimetrics to a coaching report. We sit down with the new hire and explain to them, we know you're not perfect. Here's what we needed in the job. Here's your profile. This is how you're perceived by others. Here's the areas where we're hoping you will commit to a development plan, accept support from others, and here are the areas where we're just going to try to stay out of your way, so that they know going in. We've also given an assessment to the hiring manager, and we debrief him on his profile, so he understands, some things that will be needed of him from his direct reports. And then there's the onboarding report where we use that really cool new comparison report TTI introduced about a year or 2 ago, and we sit down with both of them with the DISC and motivators and say, okay, this is how you guys can leverage each other's strengths. This is how you can communicate best with each other. Here's how to avoid some landmines. And when we find that we do that within the first week of the new hire being in their role, whether it's an internal moving up or an external coming in, we get rid of a lot of that walking on eggshells where everybody's afraid how to communicate to somebody in a new role, and maybe I shouldn't tell them this is the problem because they're new. And so we eliminate all of that, so we shorten the learning curve and really get them rocking and rolling right off the bat. The question was, do we certify our clients internally? We do not certify our clients. We will train them how to do some of these things internally as they want. In fact, Jeremy is working with Dylan, who's the competent HR person. I know that's not redundant. Competent HR person. It's not an oxymoron either. Yeah, he's a great guy, and so we're getting him up to speed so he can do a lot more of that on his own. But we don't necessarily certify, to answer the question specifically. So the cool part about it, and this is specifically about Jose, who's now in the general manager role. Jose's a great guy. Jose would do anything for OMB, which can kind of be a challenge, right? He was known for putting on his cape, flying into the rescue to do whatever he had to do, whether it was, cleaning the floors, the bathrooms,
Name it.
Yeah, which was great when he was shift manager, not so great as general manager, right? So we told him, this is one of the things that is your potential downside. So what we'd really like you to do is not to get distracted by the stuff. He was thrilled to have the accountability matrix because he knew exactly what he needed to do to stay focused. And the general manager, the HR person, the rest of the leadership team can help Jose stay on task by focusing on his accountability matrix. It also helped him understand the extent to which he has to groom others so that he can delegate to them, and all of that became part of his ongoing development plan.
All right, so now that OMB has hired this, or has promoted this superstar in theory to run this Brauhaus, they now need to focus on the staff underneath them because he can only do so much with duds. So we designed this process, and when I came on board, to give you a little bit of back history, I learned the bundled approach and challenged John and Cyndi and said, this is fantastic for managerial positions and high-level positions, but the world still needs help hiring the servers and the unskilled, or semi-skilled laborers of the world, and that's, dealing with the unemployment rate as it is now is becoming so critical. So I said, we need to design a process that really helps these hiring managers with these kind of server level or entry level positions, because it's just as important to the organization. So this is our accelerated selection process. We took some of the best practices of the bundled approach and kind of boiled them down a little bit. So this one's called the uncover stage. And what we did is we met with the hiring manager, Jose, I guess it was at that point, and determined the top performers they had on the job. So we took their best servers, and they even threw us a few curveballs in there because they wanted to see how different the position was between a bartender and a server, because that's kind of the next promotion chain of command. And we gave them the talent insights assessment. Begrudgingly, I had to observe on-the-job characteristics, so I was sitting at the bar, observing some of the best behaviors, and it was perfect because it started raining, and I had to watch this whole staff go into overdrive mode because everyone was coming from outside, inside, and they were freaking out, and it was great. It wasn't so fun when I had to go help the fire alarm team and observe their on-the-job characteristics, but true. You take what you get. So once I got all the assessments back, I was able to start to identify some of the commonalities between all these superstars. And that's where we get a little geeky. I think you're in the way. All right. So we get all this raw data from the talent insights assessments, and I sit down with the manager after John kind of pours over all the data and tells me what it really says. And I start to get their input on what type of characteristics they want in the future superstars, looking at all the data of their current superstars. So they're able to determine, okay, yeah, we want a little bit more consistency, not as much, what's the high?
Individualistic.
No, the competitiveness, we want that really low. And they're able to put their spin on the future candidates. And what comes out of that?
Well, Jeremy was also looking at the adapted style.
Right.
Because we could see consistent movement in the superstar's adaptation, which meant it had to be environment. It wasn't just accidental.
Right. And so what we did is we created this profile, and we ranked the behavioral hierarchy terms from 1 through 12, and then the motivators from 1 through 6. And we're able to kind of identify what the perfect candidate looks like and where we want them to fall in terms of the behavioral hierarchy.
Yes? Yeah, so when Jeremy was looking at the superstars' profiles, we not only saw some commonalities in their natural style, but there was a consistent shift in the adapted styles. So surprisingly, and I would have never thought this for servers, but even the low S's were shifting a little bit more up. I would have thought servers would have shifted down, but at this location, their culture, it shifted up. So it allowed us, so when Jeremy's reviewing this with the manager, they were able to decide, is that something we need to incorporate in the future superstar, or is this an anomaly? What do we think? So they were able to have conversations around the adapted style, not just the natural style.
Yep. Yes?
In a position like that, what markers do they use to indicate their top performers?
They're just hand selected by their manager.
The manager who said, these are my go-to people.
Yep. Yeah. There was no real KPIs that we looked at. They just said, these are the 10.
Most managers know that. They may have a tougher time figuring out who their B players are. They know their A's.
Yeah. Yep. So I took the top 5 behavioral hierarchy terms, and I'm not zooming in yet, and the top 3 motivators, and put them in a quick comparison report that I just made on the fly. So that and I'll explain how this kind of comes into the interview process in a second. But just real quick, what do you think the top behavioral hierarchy terms or behavioral hierarchy attributes were for this job in motivators? Anyone want to take a wild guess? That was up there.
That would have been ours. That would have been our first guess.
Yep. For a server working in a for-profit business?
Sure.
What would you think?
People-oriented.
Yep.
Sure.
Customer-oriented. Customer service.
Yep. Yep. What came...
Altruism, not even close. Our Brauhaus folks, our microbrew fans, What do you think would be the number one motivator? Yep.
Yep.
We thought it was going to be aesthetic.
Social's up there.
Yeah.
Yep. So, gosh, this thing's jumpy.
I know. It's not like ours.
So, oh, you can see it. So this
Oh,
is their.
social was two.
Yep.
It was
so
number two.
I'll explain.
You're right.
This is why their culture. This is what helped us identify what was so critical to their culture. They have a high theoretical. So they have such a unique beer that they have to describe to their customer what their beer is, because it's not like anything they've ever had. So you can't go in and say, I want your hoppiest IPA, because they don't have hoppy IPAs. They can't go in and say, I want your closest thing to a Bud Light, because they don't have anything that's closest to it.
Yeah, so if you went into a microbrew here and your favorite is Grist, you said? Grist. Nobody knows what that
No.
beer is in Arizona. So he'd have to say, this is what I like. And they'd go, oh, then you gotta try this one because it's made like this and we do this with it. And
Yeah.
they're all like super geeked about it.
Yeah. So they have to be able to describe the beers to their customers. They also love to give back to the community. So that's one of their core values, is kind of finding a way to give back. So there is a social aspect to their job. And obviously the utilitarian, you want to make sure you're getting a higher ROI. One of the biggest things we did see is that all of their team members had an individualistic in the tank.
Gone.
And yep, very, very low. And that's because they have a shared tip pool. And it was clear that they had to be part of a team, and anyone with a really high individualistic and a really high D was going to be a cancer to their team and not going to be a fit at all.
And it was wild because they had this one guy, when Jeremy had asked them for their superstars, they're like, well, maybe Dave, but yeah, not sometimes Dave, not sometimes Dave. And they're like, well, what's the problem with Dave? And once they described him, nothing personal.
Yeah.
But then we realized it's that high. Once we did this, it's like, it's the high individualistic. That's why Dave doesn't fit in.
Yeah. So they promote all the high individualistics to be bartenders because they're on an island by themselves. And they love it. Gosh.
Dang.
Well, I needed to zoom out to show the... So out of this profile, or out of this, when we created the profile, we put together did you move it? The interview guide and profile report, much like we did with the bundled position, just a little smaller, doesn't contain as many interview questions because we don't do the soft skills. But they still have a process to walk these servers through and bartenders and whatnot.
And y'all can come up and see this later.
Yep.
This one, Jeremy and I took some time since we'd both come out of hospitality, and we love OMB, that we
Yep.
customized some of the questions so they're not all the standard ones that TTI has.
So now that they understand the process, I sent Dylan, the HR manager, their custom TTI link so that they don't have to rely on us to administer these assessments. They're able to, once the candidate takes it, this is where this comes in, they're able to slot their results that they gets automatically into these areas and immediately start seeing where they're going to start probing for gaps in the interview. And they're looking for if these persons can cope with those or if they're just not going to be a fit.
So think about this for a second, right? Unemployment rate